Hi, this is Joe DioGuardi. We're about to have a wonderful historic event at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Lower Manhattan. And I wanted the people who were not able to attend the dinner to see this beautiful location. Here's the entrance to the museum, Battery Park, and we will walk around the corner. Back of the museum is the Statue of Liberty. And here's that great lady standing there. So you know we're at the bottom of Manhattan. My father always told me he had tears in his eyes in 1929 as his boat from Naples passed that statue. That's wonderful. He came from one of the Albanian-speaking villages in Italy. Albanians have been there for like 500 years, still speaking Albanian today. Well, here we begin the cocktail reception on the third floor of the museum, and what we did is we got 20 posters to put up around the room so that people could have a drink, talk, and then walk around and see the work that the League has done. Here's an article that Shirley wrote in defense of the Albanian nation, but we also had congressional resolutions that we put up. And here is a kind of road of what we did over 20 years to get independence for Kosovo. And we also had a picture of Harvey Saunders' book, Rescue in Albania, an introduction by Congressman Gilman and Congressman Lantos, and that obviously is important. So now the people are coming into the room little by little, socializing, and part of it is getting to know each other. Basically, the people you're looking at are the families, friends, and guests of the members of the board of the Albanian American Civic League. We didn't advertise tickets. We pre-sold tables, starting with the members of the board. Here's the Leader family, who were nice enough to sponsor a table in the first row. And here's now Shirley and I are walking around greeting guests. I had just left from downstairs to make sure the tables are all set properly. And it's interesting that people want pictures because they put them on Facebook. They send them back to their relatives. Here's Leka Raznici from Kosovo with Aga Milichkai. Both families played a very key role in Kosovo, saving many Jews by getting them from Kosovo, where the Nazis occupied, and it was very toxic for Jews to be, and getting them over the border to Albania, kind of like an underground railroad that we had in the Civil War. Well, here they're coming into the ballroom, and they're picking up the program. The program listed all the speakers, and we had quite a few because everyone we invited to speak agreed, and we were surprised that that happened, so we had to keep the program on track. That was a challenge that Shirley and I had throughout the dinner. But here they're coming in, and you can see the room fits 300 people.
Okay, everybody, just come on in quickly.
And now I'm encouraging people to take their seats.
Congressman Gibson has to go back upstate, and the weather is terrible. Come on in, quickly. Pick up your journal there. You got it. Come on in. We're starting the program. Congressman Gibson has to speak. Jerry.
The famous Jewish philosopher Elie Wiesel once said that the implications and the applications of the Holocaust are universal. I believe that Ron Retner is someone who understands this very, very deeply. The seeds of tonight actually began a year ago in Washington, D.C., where we held a similar event, and Ron insisted that we needed to bring this knowledge of the Albanian role during the Holocaust to New York City. And it was because of the early and substantial financial support of Karen and Ron Retner that we are here tonight. Karen, I hope you have a chance to stand, and Ron, please come to the podium.
Well, I certainly want to, this would have also not happened without the effort of, tremendous effort of Joe and Shirley DioGuardi. You guys are amazing, and there are no greater proponents that I know of Albanian American, Albanian Jewish relations than Joe and Shirley DioGuardi, and I am forever grateful to you for your efforts and your friendship. The Albanian rescue of its Jewish population, as well as the thousands of Jews rescued from neighboring Kosovo and Macedonia, is a message to the world that genocide should never be tolerated, and a bold example of a small nation standing up to tyrants in defiance to protect a persecuted minority. The Albanian message resonates in our world and in our time, which cavalierly witnessed the Bosnian, Cambodian, Rwandan, and Sierra Leone genocides. The world callously ignored the ruthless, senseless, indiscriminate slaughter of entire populations, targeted only for their ethnicity, religion, tribalism, or nationalistic hatred. At this very moment in the Middle East, hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been slaughtered, and hundreds of thousands more are on track to be slaughtered, due only to their differing interpretations and historic practices of the same broad religion. To my mind, nothing could be more senseless than the killing of innocents for no reason except for their religion, ethnicity, or historic hatred. Oppressed by the Ottomans for 500 years, Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, and Jews lived side by side, tolerating each other's religious beliefs and practices. The Albanian example so sharply contrasts with the Christian-Muslim bloodletting in countries like Lebanon, Egypt, or Syria. In defiance of the Ottoman rule, the Albanians survive by forging their own national code of conduct, ethics, rules, and laws, independent of and in contravention of their imperialistic ruler. The Albanian rescue of its Jewish minority was the historic outgrowth of its national character and honor and Albanian practice of protecting all Albanian nationals from outside persecution and oppression. Numerous psychological studies were undertaken during the Nazi war tribunals. The perpetrators of genocide tended to be rigid, intolerant, remorseless, cruel, violent, angry, filled with self-hate and irrational hatred of others, which enabled them to direct and target their hatred and violence on innocent, defenseless targets without remorse, compunction, or conscience. Having endured 500 years of Ottoman oppression, the Albanians first defied the Italian occupiers and then the Nazis. With its long history of defiance, the Albanians have the national courage and character to stand up to the Nazi bullies in protecting their Jewish citizenry from persecution and slaughter. The Albanian rescue of its Jews is a message to the world that each of us stand up against intolerance, hatred, and those evil forces fomenting senseless persecution and wanton killings of innocents. I have been repeatedly asked why, as an American Jew whose family was not directly impacted by the Holocaust, have I invested tens of thousands of dollars in disseminating the story and message of the Albanian rescue of its Jews. I am adamant that Albanians should be honored and recognized for their national heroism and individual courage in standing up to and defying Nazi bullyism and atrocities. As a citizen of the world, I abhor the senseless, wanton, indiscriminate persecution and slaughter of individuals and groups victimized for racial, religious, ethnic, tribal, and nationalistic religions. I am therefore hopeful that the Albanian message resonates in some small way in a world that turned its back on Nazi genocide and the myriad genocides of our time. I pray that the world comes to its senses and suppresses the senseless, needless hatreds which all too often have resulted in wholesale slaughter and genocide. I am proud and honored to carry the Albanian torch and message of tolerance and defiance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
This is a picture I took from inside the van that we had as we crossed the border. That gate hadn't been opened in 50 years. But because the communist leader was so upset that I had gone to Kosovo before I went to Albania because of the arrogance thinking that Albania was kind of preeminent to the Albanians in Kosovo, because that's the way they were treated, you know, for many years by Tito. Don't forget, Kosovo, 2 million Albanians, they were not second-class citizens, third and fourth in Yugoslavia. Now, thank God, Kosovo is an independent state, and my wife and I had a lot to do with that, with the support of the League. But when I had announced that I was going into Pristina to face off this New Age Hitler, Slobodan Milosevic, and I brought Tom Lantos because I had brought pictures back from 6 months before when I went there, and he said, I can't believe this. I got to see it for myself. This looks like the Warsaw Ghetto. And sure enough, when he went there, Milosevic was not too smart. There were 20,000 people in front of that hotel, the Grand Hotel, and soldiers just mercilessly beat them up, used rubber bullets right in front of Tom Lantos. It couldn't be better for me to make my case, but that's how the suffering went in Kosovo. Well, we went after we made the case in Kosovo, and what was the case? We sent a signal to Slobodan Milosevic that the United States was watching. But it was Tom Lantos who inspired me to go to Albania when he told me, he says, Joe, you know, I'm born in Hungary. I know the Albanian people. And you don't have to teach me about Kosovo and Albania. But you know, if there's any opportunity to go to Albania, we have to take it. Well, in effect, that trip to Kosovo created that opportunity, and that gate was opened, a very inconvenient gate, because it took 10 hours to drive over the mountains. Albania has mountains as big as any in Europe. It's going to be one of the most beautiful places to visit when you get there. But now we go into Albania, and we end up, well, before we get there, we leave Jakova, and they wanted Tom Lantos to have an Albanian going away. Play that for me just quickly. Now, what you're seeing is Tom Lantos at his prime. Don't forget, this man was saved from the Holocaust by Raoul Wallenberg. And here he's picking up a nice young Albanian dancing. The whole town turned out yelling USA. Watch this. An incredible thing. In fact, Mrs. Lantos was in the car, and people kept throwing in gifts in the car. We'd be filling them up, and Mrs. Lantos turns to me, I hope no one throws in a baby. That'll be in my book, that little anecdote. This is the kind of escort we got going across the border. And I had my camera, so I got out. I put the Albanian cap on, which is the cap from the farmers, you know, the Highlanders there, to take that picture. '90, wow, almost 25 years ago. All right, and then we go into Albania to see Ramiz Alia. Okay, we're going back. Now, let me tell you why this is important. He didn't want Congressman Lantos to come. They only wanted me to come. But smarter minds than me said, Joe, if you go without a sitting congressman, they control everything. They're going to make it look like you support communism. And we know you don't. And you have no choice because they control the environment. So it was lucky that I brought him, and it turned out that they needed me to come, and therefore they let Lantos come because already the rumblings were happening that the people were fed up with communism because the Berlin Wall had come down just like the October before. So we go there, in effect, to send a signal to the successor of that psychotic guy, Enver Hoxha, who killed priests, rabbis. It became a Stalinist, atheistic communist state. Worse than, can you say worse than North Korea? I don't know, but just as bad. So here we are now, and this communist leader gets so intimidated by Lantos. Remember who he was? He was the chairman, founder of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. Imagine bringing the head of human rights in the world practically to Albania. So one of the things he did to kind of ingratiate himself is he brings a file out We didn't know what it was, but he announces, and we had it translated, that Congressman Lantos will be very pleased by what he sees in this file. Lantos gives it to me. And now I'm looking at the file as he's speaking, and I'm noticing all different languages and dates from 1946 to 1986. Would you believe these were the Jews that were rescued by the Albanians trying to congratulate or connect with their rescuers? The communists wouldn't let the letters through, but put them in a file for 45 years. I got that file, and I realized this was important. And thank God I had a good friend in Israel, Ellie Streit. Ellie, where are you? You're here someplace. Ellie Streit, okay. Ellie made the trip from Israel, and I said to Ellie, you know, you got to take this immediately to Yad Vashem. I think this has great significance. Well, Yad Vashem could not believe that they did not have these names. Well, now we have 69 righteous among Gentiles since that time. So obviously we're on our way. But guess what? There should be 3,069, because not only were 300 Jews saved in Albania, some of whom were there from the burning of the Second Temple, their families, 70 AD, another 3,000 plus got over the border from Yugoslavia, where it was Nazi occupied, into Albania, which was Italian occupied. Not so bad until the Nazis then came into Albania. But nevertheless, the Albanians would not give up one Jew. They wouldn't give the lists. They were at risk of their life. And these were people who were basically not that well educated. Remember who perpetrated the Holocaust? Germans with PhDs, intellectuals, smart people. How could they ever think that that was a way to treat anybody? And yet these Albanians, suffering under the worst communism, they hid these people, and they were threatened, many of them with a gun to their head, because the Germans knew they were somewhere. In any case, here I am sitting on the wall with Ellie Streit, my first trip to Israel. In fact, this is 1985, and he's telling me about things. That's the old wall right there, the old city. Isn't that beautiful? The story will continue because we feel this is a new horizon for us with Ron Bretna. My wife and I feel that now we have located people we didn't know. Because that article was in the New York Times, probably 80 or 90 Jewish people called, and some of them were Jews who were from Albania. And I used one or two of them to contact others, and we have today in this room 2 tables as our guests, pretty much, 2 tables of Jews from Albania. Would you stand up? The Solomoni family, the Yakovo family, Bozo family, and yeah. Thank you. Now I want to introduce, it's a little bit out of order, but the co-chairman of the program with me and Shirley is Ron Bretna, who has spent a lot of time thinking about this and financially supporting it. He's been my friend since I was a congressman, even before, and Ron wants to introduce his good friend, Congressman Chris Gibson. Ron.
Well, I'm deeply honored and moved that my good friend, a great American, both who had an extensive military background, has been a congressman from upstate New York, and probably has more firsthand experience, more knowledge of the foreign policy and military policy of this country. Chris, I am deeply honored that you're here with us tonight, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to my good friend Ron, and ladies and gentlemen, privileged to be here, honored to be with you here at the museum this evening for a wonderful, incredible cause. And how about our congressman here, Joe DioGuardi? How about that leadership getting us in here? How about that? How about that?
Don't forget Shirley.
Yeah, well, I'm getting to that. And, you know, it was, you know, as we were mingling around in the cocktail hour and to see the posters and to see the history, the bills that were there dating back decades, and the common theme there, you saw the leadership of our Congressman Joe DioGuardi. We deeply appreciate that. Of course, his bride, Shirley, they've been instrumental in the cause of freedom. They've been working to advance that in the United States Congress for many decades. certainly instrumental to standing strong with Israel and Albania and bringing our message of freedom throughout the world. We deeply appreciate that. And, you know, for me to be here this evening, I represent the 19th District. I'm honored to be with my colleague, Jerry Nadler, who's also been a strong leader. Absolutely. Yes, indeed. And, you know, for me, I have 11 counties in upstate New York, including some very strong Albanian American communities. I don't know if anybody's here tonight from Dutchess County, but we've got some great communities there, and then of course Ulster and Sullivan, and I'm honored to represent them. And you know, for me, it's not just that representation and why I'm here. I want to tell you that it's also personal for me. You know, as Ron mentioned, I was in the military up until 3 years ago. I'm a veteran of the NATO mission to Kosovo, and it was there, yes indeed, a great mission. Thank you. Indeed. You know, I was on that mission, and that I saw firsthand such a beautiful and rare land and an incredible people. The Kosovar Albanians, people of integrity, humanity, and representing, I think, all that's good in this world. And when you put that together with, you know, the affinity here that we feel in the museum and the work that was done in the Second World War, Albania, being there early and all the way for the Jewish people fleeing the Holocaust. And we thank the Albanian people for showing true humanity to the rest of the world. That's right. And so now here today, you can see the themes. The theme of freedom, of unity, of dignity and respect for all people. These are ideals. These are ideals worth standing up for and worth fighting for. And you can see now why I was anxious to be here tonight. Even with the weather that's challenging, nothing was going to keep me away. And I want to say to the ambassador who's here today, we stand with you. We appreciate your leadership. We're glad you're here tonight. And this room is filled, which fills me with inspiration and excitement. So have a great evening. God bless each and every one of you. And God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. We're very happy that you're all here tonight. I'm Shirley Cloyes, DioGuardi, the Balkan Affairs Advisor to the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation, and I believe that we are ready here to embark on an important journey. We're recognizing at the Museum of Jewish Heritage the unique role that Albanians played in Albania and Kosovo in saving every Jew who either lived in Albania or sought asylum there during the Holocaust, and then going from there to see how the Albanian role of courage and self-sacrifice and tolerance can be applied to modern-day genocides, to preventing genocide in our time. Before we begin, I would like to invite Rabbi Leonard Gutman up to the dais to give us an invocation.
I'm very honored to be here tonight to deliver this invocation, as I am a son, the son, I should say, of a Holocaust survivor who unfortunately was not from Albania, because my father was the only person of his immediate family who survived the war in what during the war was Greater Hungary, but my father liked to identify himself as Czech because Czechoslovakia had an American first lady. Thomas Masaryk's wife was American, and they were a democracy between the war, better than identifying with a fascist country. In any event, Avinu Sheba Shemayim, Lord Father who is in heaven, bless the assembled crowd here today, again representing and commemorating the great chesed, the goodness of the Albanian people, I should say the people of Greater Albania, who helped their Jewish neighbors, their friends, and even Jewish refugees during the dark years of the Shoah. And you know, those of us that are familiar with Jewish history know that there are very few helpers for the Jews in the course of our 2,000-year diaspora, or even before, I should say. In fact, you know, there are very few stories of those who stood up and helped the Jews. So it is so important that we acknowledge before God Almighty the importance of what people, the children, the sons and daughters of the Albanian people did to help their Jewish brethren and neighbors during the dark years of the Shoah. And you know, in Jewish tradition, we remember a lot of things. In fact, the Torah portion this week is coming up is Shmos, the beginning of the book of Exodus. And those of you that are familiar know that every name of every single person who came with Jacob to the land of Egypt is enumerated. Their names are enumerated in the Torah in the book of Exodus. So I would like to say that those that helped Jews during the Holocaust, their names will be remembered for all time. And again, Father in heaven, let us remember that in times of crisis, this is the way in which we should be acting, with morality and in preserving our humanity. And indeed, in the spirit of the Jewish holiday that we just concluded, Hanukkah, which is a festival of freedom, as was mentioned before by Congressman Gibson, freedom, the theme of freedom. And one of the themes of Hanukkah is that the Maccabees said, Mi la Hashem Elai. Who is for the Lord? Stand up with me. And again, O Lord, all the people here today, and again, this is historic, making sure that Jews and Albanians understand their shared history and that we stand up for what is right and to take care and to preserve the idea of standing up for justice and humanity even in dark times. So, Lord our God, please bless us during this period and let us all remember the history of the past. Thank you so much.
The famous Jewish philosopher Elie Wiesel once said that the implications and the applications of the Holocaust are universal. I believe that Ron Retner is someone who understands this very, very deeply. The seeds of tonight actually began a year ago in Washington, D.C., where we held a similar event, and Ron insisted that we needed to bring this knowledge of the Albanian role during the Holocaust to New York City. And it was because of the early and substantial financial support of Karen and Ron Retner that we are here tonight. Karen, I hope you have a chance to stand, and Ron, please come to the podium.
Well, I certainly want to, this would have also not happened without the tremendous effort of Joe and Shirley DioGuardi. You guys are amazing, and there are no greater proponents that I know of Albanian American, Albanian Jewish relations than Joe and Shirley DioGuardi, and I am forever grateful to you for your efforts and your friendship. The Albanian rescue of its Jewish population, as well as the thousands of Jews rescued from neighboring Kosovo and Macedonia, is a message to the world that genocide should never be tolerated, and a bold example of a small nation standing up to tyrants in defiance to protect a persecuted minority. The Albanian message resonates in our world and in our time, which cavalierly witnessed the Bosnian, Cambodian, Rwandan, and Sierra Leone genocides. The world callously ignored the ruthless, senseless, indiscriminate slaughter of entire populations, targeted only for their ethnicity, religion, tribalism, or nationalistic hatred. At this very moment in the Middle East, hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been slaughtered, and hundreds of thousands more are on track to be slaughtered, due only to their differing interpretations and historic practices of the same broad religion. To my mind, nothing could be more senseless than the killing of innocents for no reason except for their religion, ethnicity, or historic hatred. Oppressed by the Ottomans for 500 years, Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, and Jews lived side by side, tolerating each other's religious beliefs and practices. The Albanian example so sharply contrasts with the Christian-Muslim bloodletting in countries like Lebanon, Egypt, or Syria. In defiance of the Ottoman rule, the Albanians survive by forging their own national code of conduct, ethics, rules, and laws, independent of and in contravention of their imperialistic ruler. The Albanian rescue of its Jewish minority was the historic outgrowth of its national character and honor and Albanian practice of protecting all Albanian nationals from outside persecution and oppression. Numerous psychological studies were undertaken during the Nazi war tribunals. The perpetrators of genocide tended to be rigid, intolerant, remorseless, cruel, violent, angry, filled with self-hate and irrational hatred of others, which enabled them to direct and target their hatred and violence on innocent, defenseless targets without remorse, compunction, or conscience. Having endured 500 years of Ottoman oppression, the Albanians first defied the Italian occupiers and then the Nazis. With its long history of defiance, the Albanians have the national courage and character to stand up to the Nazi bullies in protecting their Jewish citizenry from persecution and slaughter. The Albanian rescue of its Jews is a message to the world that each of us stand up against intolerance, hatred, and those evil forces fomenting senseless persecution and wanton killings of innocents. I have been repeatedly asked why, as an American Jew whose family was not directly impacted by the Holocaust, have I invested tens of thousands of dollars in disseminating the story and message of the Albanian rescue of its Jews. I am adamant that Albanians should be honored and recognized for their national heroism and individual courage in standing up to and defying Nazi bullyism and atrocities. As a citizen of the world, I abhor the senseless, wanton, indiscriminate persecution and slaughter of individuals and groups victimized for racial, religious, ethnic, tribal, and nationalistic religions. I am therefore hopeful that the Albanian message resonates in some small way in a world that turned its back on Nazi genocide and the myriad genocides of our time. I pray that the world comes to its senses and suppresses the senseless, needless hatreds which all too often have resulted in wholesale slaughter and genocide. I am proud and honored to carry the Albanian torch and message of tolerance and defiance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. It's a wonderful historical accident, and this follows very nicely from Ron's wonderful commentary, that we are here on the night before at the United Nations. There will be the 65th anniversary, the observance of the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. We're very fortunate tonight to have Kimberly Mann with us. She heads the program on the Holocaust and UN Outreach Program, and she is going to have to leave very shortly because she is conducting the program at the United Nations tomorrow that many of us will be attending. Kimberly, would you like to come up to the mic?
Thank you for coming.
Good evening, everybody, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for inviting me. I want to congratulate the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation for putting this important event together. The subject of rescue is one that we take very closely to heart at the United Nations. In fact, with the UN Holocaust Program this year, it was the theme, and many of you might know that we focused on the story of a family of rescue during the Holocaust Memorial Ceremony last January. And it was with great pleasure that we were able to tell this story of the Jewish Mandil family and how the Albanian family, the Veselis, rescued them. And They have been, as many of you know, determined as righteous among the nations. So I encourage you all to have a look in this wonderful booklet that Shirley worked so hard to put together. And there you will see the magnificent list of Albanian families that rescued Jews during the Holocaust. So I'm very happy to hear that many of you will be joining us tomorrow at the UN for the 65th anniversary of the Genocide Convention. It begins at 10 and concludes at 12. We're looking forward to that event. The Holocaust program focuses on these stories. I would have to say that through personal stories, we can learn the universal lessons of the Holocaust. We want to focus on stories of anti-Semitism and the consequences of anti-Semitism and other forms of discrimination. The survivors are among the last witnesses of this tragedy, and we work very closely with survivors in New York and around the world to tell this story. And finally, I want to thank the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous, because together with this foundation, the UN Holocaust Program organized events, 130, in 42 countries, focusing on the topic of rescue. And so that's, I'm very proud to share that with you. And thank you again very much for inviting me this evening.
Today, Felicita, she'll be introduced, is the head of the Israeli-Albania Friendship Society. So we are now going to uncover many, many more stories, and you're going to get many more chapters of good information and heroism. Thank you all for coming tonight.
In 1990, at the very point that Joe and Tom Lantos were in Albania, Felicita Yakowel was about to embark on a very, very dangerous journey. She was born after the Holocaust, but her father was a survivor. She's an Albanian Jew, and she was about to escape communist Albania into Greece, delivering the message and the letter documenting all of the Jews who were living inside. That's all I'm going to say, because I want you to hear her remarkable story. She's a remarkable woman. Felicita.
Good evening, everyone. I am Felicita. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm very excited. I'm not used to speak to so many people, but I think that it's so important. First of all, I was born in Tirana, in Albania, and today I live in Israel. And when I came in Israel in 1991, the first question that people used to ask me when I told them that I'm from Albania was, where is Albania in the map? And I can understand them. Albania for 50 years was the most closed, hermetically closed country in the world, as you know. So, you know, I have to give all the time geographical lessons. Albania is between Yugoslavia and Greece, in front of Italy. And once I met a very nice guy, young, nice, yes, and he also asked me, where is Albania? And I was sick and tired giving geographical lessons. And I told him Albania is between Laos and Cambodia. And he said, ah, South Asia. Yeah, and then, you know, I found somebody. He knew exactly where Albania was on the map. And of course, I married him, okay? He's my Israeli husband. But friends, speaking about the Jews of Albania, I have to tell you that this community is a very ancient one. The Jews of Albania, in fact, they came from Greece only 120 years ago. It was one region, all that area was under the Turkish dominion. So these families, they came from northern Greece, from a town which is called Janina, and they came in Albania in order to make business. And they did very well. But the Jews of this town, Janina, are very special because they are not from Central Europe. They don't speak Yiddish. They are not from Turkey or you know, Spain. They don't speak Ladino. We speak, or they spoke only Greek. And they are there from 2,000 years ago, from the destruction of the Second Temple. The temple was destroyed. The Romans, they took the Jews as slaves in Rome. And this very ancient story says that one of the ships, instead of going to Rome, a very strong, you know, tempest deviated the ship, and the ship came to Greece. And this is how these Jews, they are there. That's the story. So 120 years ago, the Jews, they came to Albania, and the most important thing is that they did very well. And I'm not talking here only economically, which they did, but they did very well as far as good relations with the local population. And these wonderful relations, they were fully displayed during the Second World War. You know, you have heard a lot of stories about the saving of the Jews by the Albanian people. But, you know, when I was a teenager, and my father used to tell me those stories, you know what? I was a little bit tired. You know, teenager people? And I used to tell them, what are making a fuss about this? You were an Albanian Jew, and you had good Albanian friends. You spoke Albanian. They saved you. What's the big deal? I saw this as the most natural thing in the world. You know, when I fully realized what happened with the Jews, only when I came in Israel in 1991. When we came in Israel in 1991, and many Jews from Serbia, Macedonia, even from Vienna, they heard that the Jews of Albania now they are in Israel. They used to come and talk to us. And I heard such wonderful stories. Each one of these stories is one most beautiful than the other. And of course, I cannot tell you all of them. I'll tell you only one. I met this woman, her name was Mimi Conforti. And she came to me and she said, look, I have to tell you this. I was a small girl. We escaped from Serbia. We did not have documents. We have only forged documents. And the Albanian soldier in the border, he realized that, but he let us come in. And then said, my father, he paid a simple person. He had a donkey. And on the donkey, we put our things, and we started a long journey towards the mountains. And we arrived in a remote village, and we found like a hut, yes? And we entered the hut, and there we decided to pass the night. In the middle of the night, we heard somebody knocking on the door. We were terrified. The Germans came. We opened the door, and it was this mountaineer. He didn't say a word. He took a sack of flour. He threw it on the floor, and it disappeared in the evening without telling us our name. He said, this guy, he saved us. And today she told me, I cannot tell who saved us, because all the Albanians, they behave towards us the same way. And today she took my hands and she told me, I can tell you only one thing, all the Albanian people saved us. So, but let's go back. You know, I was born and I was raised in the most terrible dictatorship in the world. So the war ended, the Jews were saved, not only the Jews of Albania, 200 people, but thousands of Jews. It is estimated there are more than 2,000 Jews which came from all over Europe. And then the bad news started coming. My father, he had a sister, and her name was Eftihia. It's my name, but in Greek. My name is Felicita, which means happiness. And she was married, she lived in Corfu. She was a beautiful young woman. The Germans came, they took them in July 1944. And she had two small kids, the husband, the entire family. They put them in those terrible boats and terrible trains, and friends, they never came back. For the entire Jewish community of Corfu, only 7% came back. And Corfu, it's only a few miles away from Albania. The war ended, and the regime was established, the communist regime was established in Albania, and it started again a very difficult period. My grandfather was a rich person. They took him everything. The houses, the shops, the gold. They put him 3 years in a jail, and the family didn't know where he is. And time passes by. It was impossible to say a word, to express the most simple opinion, because you were sent immediately to jail. Now please think of my family, think of my father. He has 2 kids, and this is what he told me later. I have to make the utmost, she told us, to raise you as a free persons. I don't want to raise you as slaves. And he took this immense danger to talk to us and to tell us the truth. So to cut it short, I had 2 parallel lives. One life was inside home, and we talk about literature and history and truth and against brainwashing. And the other life was going to school and singing songs for the dictator and for the party. But this is how I was raised. Albania was a very poor country. My father had only 2 blouses, but he put his money for us to study English and French and piano, because he said education is something that they never can take away from you. 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and that's the new beginning. And he feels that the end is very close, but he's a sick person. And he's afraid of 2 things: that the Jewish community will be finished in a few years, and that the world will not know about what happened with the Jews of Albania during the Holocaust. So he did 2 things. He wrote a book, The History of the Jews of Albania, and he started translating secretly books, okay, about Jewish literature and Jewish history for us, for the members of the Jewish community, until the right moment came. And the right moment was that I got a visa for the first time in my life, and I was invited in Greece. Guys, can you imagine? I lived all my life in the poorest and the most rigid dictatorship in the world. And now I'm in Greece, I'm free. After the first shock, the first thing that I did was to ask to go to the Israeli embassy. And there I had a meeting with the ambassador. And he was fascinated. 300 Jews in Albania, a lost community. He arranged for me a trip to Israel, which was something fantastic, as you can imagine. But one of the first things that I did, I went to Yad Vashem. And as a good Albanian, I didn't do any appointment with anybody. I had here in my pocket the list of the Albanians who have helped Jews during the war, and I went to the director of the department in Yad Vashem, Mordechai Paldiel was at the time, and friends, this is how this process started, the process of recognizing these people as rights among people. This is something that I have from my family and from my father, and this is something that we have to do and continue to do. Time is running out. Most of these people, they passed away, and we have to collect the stories. And I think that many people are doing a good job, but I think that Shirley and Joe here, they are working on it also, and each one of us should do, if we can, something to help in this cause. It's very important. The small and poor Albania put an halt to this huge machine of killing people. These small people did what all the civilized countries and peoples of the world of the time, they failed to do. And I will tell you one last thing. I live in Israel. I don't know what happens in other countries, but in Israel, when you say I am Albanian, it's like you have a diploma of honor. You diploma daring. And I'm not exaggerating. Thank you so much. Faleminderit.
Thank you so much. I think most people in this room know Congressman Jerry Nadler. He's known certainly throughout New York and actually through much of the country for his towering intellect, his decades of commitment to public service, and his strong, strong advocacy for civil rights and human rights of all peoples. And even though he has never been on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, at least to my knowledge, Jerry, he has been working with us from the very beginning, both in terms of supporting the Albanian struggle throughout the Balkans for self-determination and freedom, and for bringing to international attention the unique role that Albanians played in saving European Jewry. With that, Jerry, please come up to the dais.
Well, thank you very much. You didn't really have to bring Joyce up front so she could hear me. She hears me enough. It's good she's up front for other reasons, because she ought to be. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today to celebrate the unique role that Albanians from both Albania and Kosovo played in saving all of the Jews who either lived in Albania or sought refuge there during the Shoah, during the Holocaust. I want to thank in particular Shirley and former Congressman Joe DioGuardi for all that they have done to bring attention to this important issue and for helping organize today's event. I was proud to be involved early on with the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation, along with Shirley and Joe and members of their board. Together, we sought to educate Congress and to raise public awareness surrounding the saving role of Albanians during World War II, and about the human rights struggles that they have endured in the Balkans, many of which are still unresolved. I remember joining with the late Congressman Tom Lantos, whose image you saw in the film, and former Congressman Ben Gilman at the 1995 opening of the Albanian exhibit in the Righteous Among the Nations section of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. We put the museum in touch with Yad Vashem, which responded with the important action of authenticating in detail the Albanian role. Last year, my colleague Dana Rohrabacher and I introduced a resolution that commended the Albanian people on the 100th anniversary of their independence from the Ottoman Empire, and commended the tremendous bravery and moral strength of Albanians in both Albania and Kosovo for protecting and saving the lives of Jews during the Holocaust. At a time when all too many of their neighbors were turning over their Jewish inhabitants to be slaughtered by the Nazis, Albania and Kosovo Albanians refused to do it at great risk. Even after Nazi Germany occupied Albania and the Gestapo ordered Jewish refugees in the capital city of Albania, of Tirana, to register, Albania stood strong. These life-saving actions were very much at the risk of their lives, the lives of their families and their neighbors. In the end, more than 2,400 Jews escaped to Albania from Nazi-occupied Western Europe and the former Yugoslavia during World War II. That was particularly remarkable since in 1938, approximately only 300 Albanian Jews lived in the Republic of Albania before the war. In fact, Albania is the only country in Europe that had more Jews within its borders after World War II than before the war. The Albanian example of tolerance, self-sacrifice, and courage can be and should be applied to genocide prevention in our time. This is especially important in light of the modern-day genocides in Rwanda, Bosnia, Kosovo, Sierra Leone, and now Syria. With tomorrow's observance of the 65th anniversary of the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. We must remember that we must continue to fight for the end of genocide all over the world. And unfortunately, it comes up repeatedly. The enduring friendship between our communities, along with our shared values and history, must continue to be shared and celebrated. And what happened during World War II must be commemorated and remembered. Thank you to everyone in this room for helping to spread this message and to promote our shared values. We have much more to do, so keep up the good work, and particularly thank you to Joe and to Shirley for helping arrange this and for inviting me to share these remarks tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Agim. What can I say about Agim? He's not just a board member. One of the hardest working people that I know. He has a travel agency. I remember when he started it back in the late 80s, early 90s. He was in an apartment building on University Avenue in the Fordham Road section. And little by little, he grew this into a major business. And now he's one of the premier travel tour people, certainly for Albanians, but for a lot of other people as well. But Agim, I know him personally, not just his family personally, because I've gone to Kosovo many times and met with his father, Arif. He brought his father here many times, and we had dinner. Arif is special, and you're going to hear it. One of the problems we have is that with all the things Arif has done, he has not been recognized as a righteous among nations. Why? Because there's nobody alive. And we're lobbying now Israel, because don't forget, Yad Vashem is part of Israel, to make an exception for the Albanian people, because for 45 years, the communists didn't allow any communication. And yet now we're finding these great heroic stories. So we're going to work on that, okay? Now, come on up here, Agim. Thank you for all you're doing, and we love you, okay? Thank you.
First, I really have to thank Joe and Shirley for their great work on behalf of the human rights of Albanian people in Kosovo and everywhere in Albanian lands. They are Albanian heroes, and putting together this wonderful night tonight is not easy, and thank you for that. Thank you, Ron, for your help and support. There are many other people to thank, but I will continue. I don't want to take too much of the time. There are many things that will be repeated tonight, but some great things are really worth repeating. The story that we are telling tonight is very powerful. A small nation itself in trouble. In the time when Jewish people were persecuted and they were to be exterminated, they stood up. They stood up and said, no, we are not giving up our Jewish friends. We are not giving up our Jewish neighbors. No, we are not giving up our Jewish guests who are coming from other countries. We are going to save them because they are human beings. They had no fault of being persecuted, and they deserve to live and continue their lives properly as human beings should continue. In this, there were many Albanians involved. Unfortunately, many of them, we don't know their names. This is a major project. It's not one person or two or whatever. I will, of course, talk about my father, and I am very, very proud that my father was one of the Albanians who helped Jewish people survive during the Holocaust. My whole family is very proud of my father. I want just you to see to meet my family. Please stand up. That's my wife, Sadete. I won't mention other names, all of them. They are proud of my father, as all Albanians are for all other Albanians who did this great job. My father, Arif, was one of the few educated Albanians, and then he was the executive secretary in the municipality of Deçan. His friend, Leka Rezniči's great-grandfather, Arslan Reznici. Leka is here. He's going to talk to you. Where is he? Yes. And he's going to tell his story. But his great-grandfather approached my father and asked him to issue false documentations for the Jewish families. And when he saw their pictures, and he did it knowing that these people, and he said to us many times, when I looked at these pictures, I see those good families, those innocent people, and I couldn't understand why they were being killed. Why would they be killed? Why would anyone want to kill these people? My father never asked for any recognition during the time that he spoke so many times about these events, and he wrote that also in his memoirs. He never sought anything. If he did, we would probably, while he was alive, would have found the way to recognize him officially. But he was recognized last year in a resolution in the United States of Congress, and that's great for us, for our family. It's our proud. Thanks to Joe, Shirley, of course, last year. Now, the main, you heard that this, the whole story about saving Jews has really to do with Albanian tradition. Albanian tradition and code of honor, BESA. You've heard, probably we're going to read a lot about it. Albanian people had the code of honor where it says that guests and even neighbors and whoever is in trouble and need your help, you have to help them, save them, even if you have to give your life. Otherwise, you will have no honor and no standing within the Albanian community. That was the main reason why the Albanians did and helped Jewish people. But there was another reason as well, and it has to do also with my father. Albanian people, since 1913, the Albanian land has been divided by the great powers, influenced by Russia, Kosovo, and so many other lands of Albania. They were given to Serbia and to Yugoslavia. Albanians faced 100 years of persecution and extermination, expulsion, and all kinds of human rights abuses. And they understood the plight of Jewish people because they were facing it themselves. So, my father was unfortunate because his father, my grandfather, Musa Alichkaj, was also killed just for being an Albanian. He was a shepherd. He never fought. He was not a fighter. He was coming home from the mountains. The Yugoslav army killed him in cold blood without any good reason. But that made my father stronger. It prepared him for a very difficult life to come, but honorable life. I will just say this. We, unfortunately, in Yugoslavia, we still, not only in Yugoslavia, but all over the world, we have injustices done to other people. In Yugoslavia, we still have in power a leadership which does not respect the human rights. While Kosovo, the Republic of Kosovo, is independent and is respecting the human rights of Serbian people, the Serbs in Kosovo even have privileges, not only the rights. On the other hand, Albanians in Serbia, they are discriminated, they have not basic human rights. And the Serbia, instead of apologizing for what Serbia did for the last 30 years in the Balkans, they are continuing with the same story. We are sending a message to them also for tonight. And we are sending the message to the whole world. We are sending the message of friendship, of help, of respect. Respect for others' religion, respect for others' ethnicity. That will keep this world going. That's the best that humankind can do. And we are sending to everybody that message. And thank you again, John Scherfer, for everything. Thank you for tonight.
We're going to hear from Ileana Ross-Leighton, Congresswoman Ross-Leighton, who was, until quite recently, the chair of the House International Relations Committee. Many people don't realize that her mother is actually, I should say the descendants of her mother actually were Jews who escaped the Spanish Inquisition and moved to Turkey. Turkey accepted Jews throughout that period, you may or may not know. And how ultimately her family gets to Cuba is something that I've never had time to sit down with her and discover. But it was very nice of her because she has worked with us repeatedly in every aspect of our work to bring lasting peace and stability to Southeast Europe, to send us a video from her home district in Florida.
Good evening and welcome to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where you will have the opportunity to bear witness to little known but tremendously important acts of kindness, of humanity, of heroism. Tonight, by retelling their stories, we remember and honor those Albanians who risked everything to rescue Jews from the perils of the Holocaust. I'm terribly saddened that I could not be with you in person, but I join you in honoring the virtues of tolerance, of courage, and of self-sacrifice of the Albanian people. It is an honor and a privilege to be a small part of the Albanian American Civic League and Foundation event tonight, and to welcome all of you to what I know will be a very moving evening. I want to thank Joe and Shirley for having done a superb job supporting the Albanian people and for helping to keep those important stories alive for all of us to hear and understand them. As a Cuban refugee, I remember well what it meant to live under a ruthless dictatorship that has no compassion for its people. That's why I'm such a staunch supporter of freedom and democracy. And that is why I am proud to be able to call myself a friend of the Albanian people, a people who continuously demonstrate compassion and humanity, even during the most unimaginable times of hardship and suffering. While many countries under Nazi occupation helped deport their fellow Jewish countrymen, Albania was one of a handful of places in Europe that sheltered and protected their Jewish neighbors, saving them from almost certain death. I commend the great courage of the Albanian people who risked their own lives and the lives of their loved ones to help not only their countrymen, but Jews from all across Europe survive the Holocaust in Albania and Kosovo. Imagine that under such an oppressive regime and under such great risk, the Albanian people demonstrated unparalleled courage by never wavering from their values and their beliefs of compassion and humanity. This places the Albanian people in a very rare category, and I view it as a personal duty to ensure that this story of courage, of compassion, will receive the recognition it so truly deserves and live on forever as a shining example for all of humankind. But the Albanian-Jewish relationship is two-dimensional. It is well known that during Kosovo's time of need, while the Milosevic regime was massacring thousands of Kosovars, the Jewish diaspora came to their defense and were major contributors to the humanitarian efforts and for the push to end his campaign of horror and cruelty. These two people have seen too much suffering, and they have witnessed the very worst of mankind. I take comfort in knowing that through it all, these communities will forever be linked together, sharing an understanding that no matter what, there is still good and compassion left in humanity, and that they will continue to do what is right. That is why, as a proud and committed friend of the people of Albania, I will continue to work in Congress to strengthen the U.S.-Albanian alliance and to ensure that the heroic Albanian people will never again have to face the world alone, and that the stories of so many Albanians will never be forgotten. Thank you.
I've known for many years about Raphael Lemkin. I don't know how many people in this room know about him. He's the person who coined the term genocide. 49 members of his family died in Treblinka. And also, I should say, can't forget this, it was because of all of his efforts after the war that the Convention Against Genocide was ratified by the UN. What I didn't know until I began working for this evening, putting together the panel that we have before us, I didn't know about someone named Dr. Robert Skloot. And the more I learned about him, the more I was amazed that for some reason I had missed the incredible work that he's done on Holocaust and genocide prevention and using theater as a form of communication. And he's written this wonderful play. It's called If the Whole Body Dies, Raphael Lemkin and the Treaty. It's been read around the world.
I want to say thanks to Shirley and to Joe for their wonderful work, and to the Albanian American Civic League for inviting me to address you at this important gathering. I'll use my time judiciously, I assure you. In synagogues throughout the world, the past several weeks on the Sabbath, the Torah readings have dealt with the biblical figure of Joseph. Two of Joseph's qualities that are popularly known are that he was both a dreamer and an interpreter of dreams. This evening, briefly, I want to speak to you about another dreamer and to serve for this occasion as the interpreter of his dream. I'm speaking of Raphael Lemkin, the Polish Jewish refugee to the United States, who in 1944 coined the word genocide and later became the obsessed creative force behind the writing and adoption of the United Nations Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. Because Lemkin can't be here with us tonight, he died in 1959, the few minutes I have to speak will be dedicated to telling you just something about this extraordinary world citizen who actually changed the course of history and, equally important, left us the legacy of continuing his work. Born on a farm in northeastern Poland, Lemkin's earliest remembrances included hearing and being upset by the stories of innocent victims of mass violence. In his autobiography, Lemkin writes movingly about his attachment to and concern for historical peoples whose fate was to be marked by annihilation. Those suffering multitudes were never far from his thoughts, while young or as he grew older. Among them, as Shirley mentioned, 49 of his own family were murdered in the Holocaust. Lemkin grew up to become a prominent international lawyer with PhDs in law and linguistics. He spoke 11 and perhaps 14 languages and was a lone figure whose passion to outlaw the slaughter of innocents became the single determining cause of his professional life. For the record, he had no personal life. Lemkin escaped from the early depredations of the invading Nazis by his courage, his wit, and his luck, and made his way through Siberia and Japan to the United States, where he became a professor of law, a member of the United States delegation to the Nuremberg trials, and finally, with his lifelong purpose long decided, took up his unofficial position as the unstoppable human force behind the treaty that became the single foundational document that all discussions of genocide must acknowledge. Lemkin was moved to use his extraordinary intellect and powerful skills of persuasion to compel the devastated post-war world to commit itself to a goal that still eludes us today. He believed with all his wounded heart that in the law could be anchored the definitions, prohibitions, and penalties for engaging in genocide. In doing so, he was unable to remain detached from the nasty minutiae of political conflicts though he hoped that the power and purity of his cause would bring healing and justice to a damaged world. He was wrong on both counts. In the years before his death, that should have been crowned by admiration and regard, his life was despoiled by dire financial distress, importuning, threatening creditors, relentless adversaries, and deteriorating physical and mental health. Together, they took a terrible toll on his finely calibrated sense of rectitude and idealism. In response, Lemkin used the rejection and insult he received to confirm and take courage from his permanent status, which is so common a condition in Jewish culture, the status of an outsider, a Hebrew among Gentiles, an accented immigrant among the native-born, a self-appointed emissary among the officially sanctioned, an aesthete among the Philistines. It was the Canadian politician and academic Michael Ignatieff who identified what I believe to be Lemkin's most important and compelling contribution to the prevention of genocide: his supreme act of moral imagination. That quality of his makes us ask why any one group of people should care for another's welfare. Specifically, and with history providing exterminatory evidence, it is not out of place to ask you, the distinguished company here in this room, what you know and feel about Darfurians, about Bosniaks, about Cambodians and Guatemalans. We know and we justly celebrate tonight what the Albanians felt and did for the Jews 3 generations ago in an earlier time of terror and destruction. The catalog of victims I mentioned testifies to the true importance of Lemkin's treaty, for in it lies the necessary revision of the common wisdom and common practice of caring for our own, if not exclusively, then certainly as a first priority. Lemkin's treaty against genocide, in truth, establishes an entirely new standard for determining, judging, and punishing violence, because it relies on nothing rather than an acknowledged, selfless concern for the humanity of those to whom we owe nothing. Realizing this allows us to recognize how extraordinary was his successful international crusade to get his treaty ratified. But looking back to that date in December 1948, when it was adopted, and our own violence-ridden world today, we must acknowledge the suffering of his, the insufficiency of his extraordinary achievement. Finally, when Lemkin died semi-anonymously, the glass of his singular compelling cause was both half empty and half full. And that is how I will leave Lemkin now, a citizen of the world with a resemblance to us in both his heroic and his deeply flawed nature. His work must become our own, and his word, genocide, must be used when necessary and not avoided in order to make preventing and punishing mass murder a condition that is occurring as I speak to you tonight, making it more, that is to say, stopping that more possible. I concluded the introduction to my play about this great citizen of the world thus. Raphael Lemkin, ingesting heart medication in a cheap Manhattan walk-up, depressed that his adopted country refused to accept his plan to stop genocide, hounded by bill collectors and sustained by a few friends and not a little vanity, was battered by storms internal and outside himself. But in the darkness of another tempest, this one Shakespeare's, I hear, as he must have felt, Miranda's immediate empathic connection when she watched the visitors shipped to her island being battered by the furious waves. And she says, "Oh, I have suffered with those I saw suffer. Oh, the cry did knock against my very heart." Thank you.
You know,
I also think we're very, very fortunate tonight to have Albania's ambassador to the United Nations with us, Farid Hoxha. I'm sure you all read his compelling comments to the New York Times in Joe Berger's wonderful article that appeared last month about saving the Albanian rescue, I should say. With that, Farid.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Shirley and Joe. I would like to say on behalf of Albania, on behalf of the Albanian government, how much we appreciate what you have been doing in the last two and a half decades, how you have been supporting Albania and Albanians everywhere in the region. And if Albania is what today, a country developed and looking towards the future, it is also because you have contributed to that. In your documentary, you showed that Albania resembled when you first went there to North Korea. That's true. Today, Albania has no better friend than the United States of America, and you have contributed to that. Many things and very important things have been said tonight about Albania and Albanians. They could not make me prouder of my people, of my nation, and I would like to thank all the important speakers for their words of recognition. I think that after the course of this evening, you already know almost everything about the Albanian story of saving the Jews. But what makes the Albanian story a very particular one is that, contrary to every other narrative of the Holocaust, there is no sad story in the Albanian one. It is not about death of innocent people in an effort to exterminate a nation. It is in its entirety a story of courage, a story of humanity, a story of compassion, respect, and love for the other. It is simply a story of life. The easy way for me would have been to just read the remarkable piece that Joseph Berger wrote a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times, but I think you have all seen that. So I will just make a couple of comments which, in my view, encapsulate the essential of the Albanian behavior. The most important fact to remember is that the entire Jewish community, everyone, rich and poor, educated or not, young or old, those already living in Albania or everyone who came from outside, they all were met with an open door, a warm heart, and offered the secure shelter that others around Albania refused to them. Whatever the time, whoever the ruler, whatever the difficulties the country has been through, and it has been through in its long history, there is one fundamental thing to remember. There is no history of anti-Semitism in Albania. There is no experience of hate speech. There is no bigotry. Respect for others' religion, culture, and heritage has been a fundamental part of the Albanian society since ages, a value carefully transmitted through generations, something we dearly cherish and strictly observe today. It was mentioned there were a handful of countries in Europe that stood up and saved thousands of Jews, thankfully. But what makes the Albanian story and behavior unique are the very simple yet meaningful facts. Every Albanian Jew survived the Holocaust. Every Greek, Yugoslav, Austrian, Bulgarian, German Jew who was lucky enough to enter Albania also survived. No instance was ever found that any Albanian asked any retribution for what they did. Like no other occupied country, Albania became a Jewish sanctuary, and it was mentioned, 10 times more Jews within its borders at the end of the war than at the beginning. In Albania, in the US, in Israel, and elsewhere, we honor the exceptional courage of the righteous and Gentile, and rightly so. But what is fundamentally different about the Albanian story is that Jews were not rescued in secret by the exceptional good persons. Entire villages knew about the Jews in their midst, and no one ever turned anyone in. This is the very exceptional behavior of an entire society whatever their social class, whatever their origin, whatever their religion or their beliefs. It is a deep sense of pride and honor, a willingness to care for the other, a profound sense of hospitality to welcome, honor and protect at any cost a guest or whoever in need, a timeless readiness to help with whatever available that explains this behavior. And for all this, we just have one word, and that is besa, which means the promise. You give the word and you keep the word. You promise and you deliver. It has been then and it is now, and there are no foreigners in Albania, there are only guests. And Albanians know how to treat their guests, and they've shown that. One final word. It was amply mentioned, but evolving at the UN for the last 4 years, I could not miss to mention that this event couldn't be more timely, Shirley and Joe. Tomorrow the UN will commemorate the 65th anniversary of the Convention on Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, and we have this excellent explanation by the previous speaker. This important piece of legislation has gone a long way. 144 countries have ratified it, including Albania. But there is still a lot to do. The terrifying stories of Rwanda, Bosnia, and Kosovo, to mention the most recent ones, remind us that we must remain vigilant, that unfortunately history repeats itself in its worst, and that our duty is to never forget. The world has become a better place, there is no doubt, but it's hardly a perfect one. Humanity will improve if we continue to learn from our past tragedies and our own mistakes. If we keep up the memory of the brave and never forget the consequences of hate, discrimination, and indifference. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to work with Leka Reznicki since 2006, and for a few years, his wonderful grandfather, Mustafa Reznicki, who died in 2008. As Joe said earlier, Kosovo acted as an underground railroad, rescuing Jews and getting them to safety in Albania. The compassion and empathy and intelligence of the Reznicki family had a great deal to do with this. And I want Leka to come to the podium now and tell this story.
Thank you, distinguished guests. Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to be here and to speak in front of this respectful auditorium. My great-grandfather, Arslan Reznicki, was one of the leading members of the Nazi resistance in Kosovo who devoted 6 years of his life to saving Jews. My grandfather, Mustafa Reznicki, an adolescent during the war, assisted him, and for the rest of his life he preserved and carried on the history of our family's role and that of other Kosovar Albanians in rescuing Jews during the Holocaust. The narrative of Kosovar Albanian resistance to the Nazis actually begins with my great-grandfather, Arslan Mustafa Reznicki. He was a merchant in Jakova, in Kosovo, who later moved to live and work in the city of Deccan. As far back as 1931, he made a living as a trader in Albania, Macedonia, Turkey, and Greece, and his principal colleagues were Jews from Skopje in Macedonia and Thessaloniki, Greece. And chief among them were David Cohen and Rafael Natan. In 1939, on the eve of World War II, when their lives were clearly at risk with the rise of Nazism in Europe, David Cohen, Rafael Natan, and another colleague, Solomon Conforti, reached out to my great-grandfather for help. They asked to come and live with our family in Deccan if we could provide them with accommodation and security. My great-grandfather brought Cohen, Natan, and Conforti and their families into his home in 1940. Later, after Yugoslavia capitulated to the Nazis in 1941, my great-grandfather continued to hide them and eventually helped them to flee in Albania. Bearing in mind that our family owned a lot of land, but nevertheless had a modest home, my great-grandfather made an agreement with Rafael Natan, David Cohen, and Solomon Conforti to build a new stone house next to his own. The house was to accommodate their immediate families and closest relatives, and lately many other Jews seeking refuge. As word spread about the Reznici family sanctuary, other Jewish families approached our family for help, and soon 40 families from Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Serbia were sheltered in our house, sometimes for days, often for months, until my family was able to organize safe passage for them to Albania. To camouflage their presence, all of the Jewish families were given traditional Albanian clothes to wear. The residents of Deccan knew that Arslan and his wife, my great-grandmother, Fatime Stavileci Reznici, were harboring Jews, but none of them ever informed the Nazi police patrolling the area. According to Ibrahim Kadriu, a journalist, I quote him, "While the Nazis were looking everywhere for Jews, the Reznici house served as a safe shelter and transfer point for Jews," end of quote. The transport of these families to Albania, as well as of the Conforti, Nata, and Cohen families, all of which took place on 1943, was done with help of my great-grandfather's Kosovar-Albanian colleagues, Arif Musa Alichkaj, a local official of Deccan, Halim Spahiu, a merchant with contacts in the Albanian Chamber of Commerce in Tirana, and his partner Hasan Rema Zerta. Many of the Jewish families were also sent to Italy with the additional help of Pashuk Biba, a merchant, whose brother Kolja was Albanian's Minister of Interior. My great-grandfather and his colleagues were able to use their trading routes and contacts in the Balkans to secure safe passage for hundreds of Jews. Between 1943 and 1960, my family no longer had direct contact with most of the Jewish families that it had saved. Nevertheless, through Sami Mizrahi in Skopje, my family managed to get some information about the fate of the Cohen, Conforti, and Natan families. In 1960, Solomon Conforti came to visit my family, which had since moved to a new house in Pristina, on one-day visit from Greece. Solomon had a lovely reunion with my great-grandparents Arslan and Fatime, who had traveled from Deccan for the occasion, my grandmother, and other Reznici family members. At the request of Solomon Conforti, my family also invited Becir Castrati, the teacher who had taught their daughters while they were hiding. At the end of October 2007, my grandfather, Mustafa, traveled to Israel to attend the recognition at Yad Vashem of the saving role that Albanians had played during the Holocaust. 2 years earlier, in 2005, he co-founded the Kosovo-Israeli Friendship Association in Pristina, and now I manage the organization's mission and affairs. So far, we have been able to identify at least 60 families in Kosovo that provided shelter and safe passage for Jews. On March 17, 2008, Yad Vashem recognized Arslan Reznici and his family for their saving role during the Holocaust, the first Kosovar Albanian to receive the award of Righteous Among Nations. Mustafa Reznici, my grandfather, accepted the award in Kosovo's capital on behalf of his father. A year later, in 2009, Mustafa died at the age of 85. But before he died, Mrs. Shirley, Cloyes, DioGuardi, and I created and produced a videotaped oral history interview with him. As the film makes clear, my grandfather's experience during the Holocaust was one of the most formative in his life, and I will always remember his words about the role that his family played in saving Jews. No matter what the risk is to you and your family, you may never betray your promised word. Besa. Thank you very much.
Let me just say a word. By the way, today, Leka is the head of the Israeli-Kosovo Friendship Society, and he works very hard at building a strong bridge between the people of Kosovo, the Albanians there, and Israel. While he was speaking, you probably missed seeing his family. This is the grandfather, Mustafa. We were in Israel with him in 2007, and the family. Now, this is the only family to be recognized in Kosovo, believe it or not, by Israel. Just one family. And there's many, many others. As I said, Arif Alichkaj, who he mentioned, has to be recognized, and we will work very hard to try to do that. Rabbi,
Joseph Potasnik. He's had me on his radio show on Sunday mornings. I love him. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me just say, firstly, that Joe DioGuardi called me and said, Rabbi, you believe in free speech? I said, I certainly do. He said, good, I want you to come give one. So thank you so much for that warm welcome. Let me say to all of you here a word I learned tonight from a gentleman at table 1, and the word is very simply falaminderet. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. My parents, who were married to others who lost their lives, had 6 children who died in the Holocaust. And they told me many times in this country when they arrived, if we had more Albanians in other parts of the world, maybe those 6 children would still be alive today. So thank you so much. In Jewish tradition, every day of the week in the prayer book, we say thank you in different ways. One time we say it publicly, the other time we say it silently. I know there are some people who go through life and are grateful, but they never express those words. I think it's very important to publicly say thank you, especially those who have saved so many lives because of their belief in this concept of Besa, or as we say, it's a mitzvah, it's the right thing to do. I just want to say the following to all of you. Years ago, there was a magazine, as you remember, called Life. After Life, there was a magazine called People. After People, there was a magazine called Us. And after Us, there was a magazine called Self. We Jews read from right to left. So first, you can start with self. But as you understand, frankly, it's all about us as one people who want to live life as one family. Thank you very much.
Being here at the Yad Vashem, I guess, is a good place to focus on the importance of Israel to the world, not only to the Jewish community in the United States or where I am in Westchester County, but to the fact that we have here a memorial of man's inhumanity to man, at least here at the Yad Vashem, that in history there were times that we had to reflect on how bad a man can be to man.
I think you're quite right that this is a fitting starting point. I think to understand Israel, to understand the commitment of Jews around the world and of non-Jews who understand what happened 40 years ago, the silence of the world in the face of the destruction of 6 million Jews and millions of others, seeing the depths of depravity to which human beings could sink in their hatred of others. I think understanding the pledge that every Jew takes in one way or another of never again, never allowing what happened 40 years ago to happen again to any people. And Yad Vashem stands as a memorial not only to the 6 million Jews who died, but as a constant reminder to all people and as a living reminder. And when one goes through there, one can relate to it and see himself or his own family, God forbid, going through the same thing.
When you look at the hierarchy of Jewish organizations and Jewish philanthropy, and you know what? Let's take a minute and think about what this small group of people have done in the world. Not only have they succeeded in so many ways, economically, socially, but they have done so much philanthropy. When you think of the Jewish people, think of the monies that they have donated to do important things. In that hierarchy of philanthropy, at the top, in terms of prestige, is this group called the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. I went in '85 with Malcolm Hoenlein. He emerged as one of the top Jewish, most respected leaders in the country, perhaps the world. And the chairman of his group is Bob Sugarman. He just retired as an attorney from Weil Gotshal. I remember as a partner in Anderson, I was a tax partner, so I dealt with a lot of these law firms, one of the best. And he's here to give a statement to us. For him to take the time to come here says a lot about him, and we really appreciate that. And again, I hope playing Hoenlein's speech did not take away from you. Where is Bob, by the way? On the other side, yeah. Bob, come on up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joe and Shirley, for inviting me here tonight, and to my predecessor, Richard Stone, who suggested that they invite me here tonight. It's really a pleasure to share the podium with Jerry Nadler, who is off to another meeting, I'm sure, and particularly to share the podium with Rabbi Potasnik, who, as you've just heard, was able to give a very powerful message in only 2 minutes, uncharacteristic of many rabbis. Malcolm Hoenlein is a legend in the community. I am used to being upstaged by him, and I love it because he has been the chairman of the executive vice chairman of the conference for 25 years, and he is the real guts and soul of the conference. The conference is an umbrella organization made up of 50 American Jewish organizations, all segments of the Jewish community. We operate by consensus, and there are not very many issues on which we can find consensus. I'm sure you've all heard the story of 3 Jews in the room have 4 opinions. And so 50 leaders of the Jewish community in a room, you can imagine how many opinions. But on one issue, we all agree, and that is to do whatever we can to make sure that genocide never again happens in our time. It will come as no surprise to you that the principal focus of the conference right now and today is to prevent Iran from the capability of producing a nuclear weapon. For a nuclear Iran poses a grave threat to the security of the United States and the Western world. In the 3 years before I became chairman of the conference, I was the national chair of the Anti-Defamation League, and I was privileged to work with our national director, Abe Foxman, who, as many of you know, is a survivor of the Holocaust. He survived because he was hidden by his Polish Catholic nanny, who risked her life to save his. Abe says all the time that when good people said no, Jews lived, gays lived, gypsies lived. And the real honor that I have tonight is to say thank you to you and your forebears who said no, and thereby saved not only all of the Jews of Albania, but also the many who fled to Albania from other countries. And it was not, as I've learned, only by transporting Jews to safe havens or to give them false papers, which was done, but it was by hiding Jews in their homes and thereby taking incredible risks, as did Abe Foxman's nanny, to their own safety. But almost more than that, I salute Joe, Shirley, and all of you for the effort that you are making to ensure that the Albanian heroism during the Holocaust can be replicated in our time. We live in a world of conflict, sometimes dominated by fundamentalists like the Iranians, who would think nothing of eliminating not only Israel and Jews, but anyone who does not hew to their fundamentalist views. We need more organizations like yours to mobilize support to speak out against these atrocities. And so again, let me thank you for the privilege and honor of being here tonight to participate in this program.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful speech.
Thank you. I've been very fortunate to get to know Professor Colette Mazzucchelli of New York University over the last few years. She's an expert on ethnic conflict, on modern European history, And she's a visionary in the classroom. She's been using new technologies as a way to deal with our responses to teaching about how to stop mass atrocity and genocide prevention. Education is absolutely critical to our success going forward. And with that, I would like to introduce Colette.
Shirley, Joe, Mr. Ambassador, distinguished guests, and dear friends. Albania's rescue of its Jewish population during the Second World War is a story to remind us of the challenges Europe faces today. Present uncertainties of an economic, financial, and social nature, mass protests, and political stalemate speak to a crisis of identity within the European Union. Europe's leaders and peoples across the continent have the choice today to respond to a past of systemic rights violations. The identification of a 21st century narrative of European integration is one that confronts the past through commitments its leaders and citizens alike are called to make in the present. The story we commemorate this evening is indeed one of commitment, of the present-day responsibility to protect by Albanians who stood by Europe's Jews, who the Nazi dictatorship wanted the world to forget. As the facts of Albania's rescue come to light in the 1990s, so too did the acknowledgement, long overdue, by European nations of their roles in the Holocaust. As the countries of the former Yugoslavia seek membership in the European Union, we must ask how, in substantial and symbolic ways, Europe's identity may be defined with reference to the Holocaust. If Europe is to renew its project of integration, to face the challenges of this century, European lessons from the Holocaust must be drawn from the history that comes to light, with each revelation of resistance as well as complicity. The search for a political community in the European space is a quest to affirm respect for plurality. Today, this is strikingly evident as multiculturalism becomes more problematic on policy and populist grounds. This is particularly relevant for Germany's neighbors, countries that also founded Europe's communities in the 1950s, notably the Netherlands and France. As we discuss the obstacles and the opportunities to a pan-European approach to remembrance as a method to educate in mass atrocities and genocide prevention, Albania's rescue is a story to weave into the historical narrative that is yet to emerge in Europe's 21st century union. In our commemoration this evening, we remember, as Jan Werner Müller writes, that it cannot be taken for granted that the recovery of the memories of oppressed groups is automatically liberating. Ours is the duty as citizens in our democracies to face history as we challenge ourselves. We live with the contestation that arises as history reveals facts that make us question what we thought we knew. We acknowledge this evening in the story of Albania's rescue that memory, particularly disagreements about past actions, can lead us to unite in a present endeavor with a purpose larger than ourselves. This is the ethical command to remember, which Germany's experience in Europe urges humanity never to forget. Thank you.
Okay, we have another short video from Congressman Rohrabacher. Why would you want to hear from him? he has been steadfast in his support for the people of Kosovo. He has done things with his position on the committee that we need the most, the Foreign International Relations Committee, and now he's the chairman of the European Subcommittee, which makes it even more important for Kosovo. And we were able to get him to do a hearing earlier this year when Serbia was trying to make a strategy to take back the top part of Kosovo, which they may still be trying to do, and that's why our league has to be on guard at all times. I want you to hear from Dana Rohrabacher, but I want you to know the best lobbying you can do is not up here where Shirley and I call. It's getting people in that district where they live. And I want to commend Haki Devishi and Adam Dukai, who flew from California, for lobbying him over the years to make sure he understood the Albanian experience. Where are you? Haki, Adam, stand up. They're here someplace. There's Adam. Yeah, there they are. Great. Now, we're going to hear right now Congressman Rohrabacher. He did this just a couple of days ago for us.
Well, greetings to you who are gathered together there at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York. I'm Dana Rohrabacher. I'm a congressman from California, and I want to thank all of you for spending your time to pay homage to these heroes in Albania and Kosovo who showed us and who will restore our faith in humanity and humankind. Let's not overlook those acts of heroism that saved the innocent people of Europe, and especially saved the Jewish people in Europe. Those acts of heroism committed by normal people and ordinary people, in this case, Albanians and Kosovars, who had no stake really in this fight, and they stepped forward to help their neighbors, and to save them from the type of murder and genocide that was taking place. But you know, there were also Albanians and Kosovars, which you are going to be talking about today, who are not just helping their neighbors, but they were helping people they didn't even know. And they were helping just people they saw as people who would be innocent victims of this horrible genocide that was going on. And I'm so happy that you've gathered together today there in New York to pay homage to those brave people in Albania and Kosovo who actually risked their lives at that moment in history. You know, since that time, we've seen so many horrible acts of genocide where people didn't step forward, whether it was Rwanda or even when it happened in Kosovo itself just 20 years ago. We've seen so much of this bloodshed that it could actually, well, it could cause you to lose faith in the humankind itself. No one would be paying a more terrible price than those people who were caught trying to save those Jews from Hitler's torturous chambers. And the Albanians and the Kosovars deserve the respect that you're paying them today. By the way, I want to thank Joe and Shirley and the Albanian American Civic League for working with you to try to document these cases and to make sure that it's remembered. I know that you getting together today are going to fulfill some of the goals that they've been working for a long time. So congratulations to them, and thank all of you for this wonderful endeavor to congratulate people who need that historic congratulations.
Schumer, believe it or not, his plane was diverted. His staff called me and said I should play what he said. And you want to hear a statement? Now, he was there. Every time we've had a dinner, Senator Schumer has shown up. He was there last year in Washington. But I'm not going to play that one. I'm going to play what he said in 2005, probably the best statement anybody has ever made for the Albanians of Albania and Kosovo. Play it.
We should add, it was on the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps, and we held this event in response.
He wanted us to play this for you.
I want to talk about two little things here tonight. First, I just want to thank the Albanian community for showing such faith in New York. You know, you are the future. This is a hard-working community, an industrious community, a community that comes to America like so many in the past with very little and builds and creates and grows. And the second thing I wanted to thank you for is this. What a durable community the Albanian community has been in Europe. Set in the midst of the Balkans, with so many different people trying to wipe out the community, to exterminate the community, to push it away. And you survived. The Albanian community is one of the oldest communities in Europe. And over and over and over again. And what is beautiful and why I am so honored to be asked to speak briefly here tonight is this. Because you knew what it was like to be oppressed. You understood that it was your obligation to help others who would be oppressed. And that's what this community did during World War II. You know, we have an expression that we Jewish people read and during Passover, in our Passover Seder, the dinner that commemorates the liberation of the Jewish people from Egypt. But this could apply to the Albanian community as well. We say, in every generation, they have risen up to afflict us. In every generation, that's happened to our people. And just about in every generation, it has happened to your people as well. But you understood that. And despite the ravages of World War II, despite the dangers that were faced, you provided a refuge to the Jewish people. There's no better testament than the fact that Tom Lantos is here tonight. But I have been told that there was only one country in Europe where at the end of World War II, there were more Jewish people than at the beginning of World War II, and that was Albania. So I came here tonight to say thank you. To say thank you for what you have done. We share many things, the Albanian people and the Jewish people. An understanding about hard work, a devotion to family and community, and a love of America and New York. And we will not forget, just as you helped us in our time of need, we are here to help you in your time of need, and the two communities will stand shoulder to shoulder together. Thank you. God bless you.
Joe, would you like to conclude with a short introduction to comments from that you'll see on the film from Ben Gilman?
We can't forget Ben Gilman. He's not here. I was told, you know, he's 91 going on 92. He's frail. He fell like my mother did, and that happens when you get into your late 80s and 90s. And he was in rehabilitation for the last 3 months, and Georgia's wife thought that if he had a good day, she would bring him here with the wheelchair. But we prepared that he could not make it. But I said, last year we tried, he was our honoree with Tom Lantos, and he couldn't make it then because he had an occurrence. So I said, we cannot let this, he may not be with us another year. And Ben Gilman was the chairman of the International Relations Committee from 1994 to 2000, before Henry Hyde took over, and then after Henry Hyde, Tom Lantos took over. But during that time, and we have many Albanians here from Macedonia. I hate to say that. From the ancestral Albanian lands in Macedonia. Stand up, because he's your hero. I'm going to tell you why. The guys from Macedonia, stand up. Come on. You're from Atlantic City, Waterbury. They're in this room.
Real gladiators here. Joe and Shirley, my good chairman, Henry Hyde, Tom Lantos. We've been fighting for human rights for a long period of time, and I'm pleased that the Albanian American Civic League has been out front in that battle for human rights throughout the world, and for justice, and for brotherhood, and for tolerance. Such important values that all of you have been involved in for so long.
Ben was there when we needed him. When the Slavic government of Macedonia was closing down schools to teach the large Albanian population, there are today, we think more, but at least 800,000 Albanians in Macedonia. When they burned down the school, the University of Titova, it was Ben Gilman that then put a resolution in and had a hearing. It was Ben Gilman that gave Shirley and I cover, and me cover, so that we could go to Titova to reopen that school. So he played a role, and you might say, well, why didn't you work for Kosovo? Milosevic was so mad that I brought Lantos to Pristina in 1990, he had the parliament in Belgrade pass a resolution that DioGuardi was persona non grata, could not return to Yugoslavia anymore. So this is what, you know, you have to face with these guys. But here he is at a rally. This is in front of the Capitol. This is 1990 for Kosovo. Ben Gilman. You just saw him at a hearing in the Senate with Congressman Lantos. He was there, active for us at all times. Listen, the man is 91 going on 92. Let's give him a big hand. He's done so much for so many people. God bless you, Ben Gilman.
And Joe, thank you. And with that, I want to say good night. Thank all of you for being here.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. It was wonderful. All this has been taped by many, many people, and we'll put it out there right away.